Hello, everyone. Now we'll talk about retail sales and the key items that make up the facts and dimensions of retail sales. Retail sales is the most popular, or I should say, the most often utilized star schema and dimension fact tables in industry today. Today, we're going to talk about the four-step process for designing the dimensional models. One of the things you first have to do is get what level of grain or what level of transaction level you need to have for your fact tables. You need to talk about whether those are additive or non-additive facts. We'll talk about sample dimension tables, and we'll extend that dimension table even further. We'll also talk about snowflaking and how it's different than star schemas and why and when you might want to use snowflaking versus just pure star schemas. Again, the four-step process I mentioned before is you want to select the process that you want to model. You need to declare the grain or the level of detail in the business process you want to capture. Then you want to choose what's those dimensions, and those dimensions are the things that describe the fact in the row. And the fact, as we've mentioned before, in the book talks about, it's a measure, it's a measurement, something you can add, subtract, sum up, divide necessarily. So it's going to be something like, in this case, sales. It's going to be quantity. Those are the type of things you talk about in facts. The dimensions are going to be those things that define the fact. You may have numeric facts that will populate each fact table row and throughout, and the dimensions will be the key elements that describe what those fact tables have. When we talk about retail, and we talk about the case study here, we're going to talk about the SKU, or some people will note it as the item number. It's also sometimes associated with UPC, the Universal Product Code, and that's something that's recognized nationally and is across all the world. In our case study here, we have 55,000 SKUs, and they're coming from outside manufacturers. There's 5,000 of those SKUs are at stock keeping units, as they're known, for departments such as meat, produce, bakery, floral, as well as many others. But that, for our case, is the one we're going to talk about. When we collect the data in this situation in retail sales, that's usually from a point of sales, and that's usually, as you think about it, the cash register. But today with online sales, that is not always the case. Sometimes the online sales will be from an online transaction. It can also be from a thing like a pay from the phone or other type of items. Those are all different ways. But in fact, when that's happened, those are acting as a point of sales. And again, these are products that may or may be picked up by you yourself, the consumer, or can be delivered by vendors. One of the things you have to decide in retail, obviously, is how to order, how to stock those items, how to sell those products while you maximize most profits. Retail, and specifically grocery retail, can have very low margins, so it's very important that you are not overburdened with inventory or not selling things at the proper level. You have to have the right pricings and promotions on your product to make them successful. If that doesn't happen, you will not have the proper margins, or you won't have the type of traffic you need to meet the margins you need to make your business successful. The first thing you want to do is, what's the most important thing in your business? What is it that's making you not sleep at night? You need to understand exactly what the customer does and what makes them purchase or not purchase your materials. And again, you have to understand the point of sale in the retail sales. The POS is what it is. You might see it abbreviated as, but the point of sales for retail sales. Those are all key things you want to look at as you get in the process. Step two, you want to take, when you say grain, we're talking about the level of detail. And if at all possible, you want to get the lowest level or the most atomic data possible, the individual line item in a point of sale transactions. Now, having said that, those can be called transaction logs or just plain transactions from all the registers. And if you're talking about large retail thing like Walmart or Kmart, or I'm sorry, Kmart not so much anymore, but Walmart or Kroger, there's a huge volume. So even though you're going to capture this grain that you have at the lowest level, you may very seldom, if ever, show that level of grain as part of your data warehouse. And again, you're going to want to choose the dimensions. And by dimensions, we're talking about things that describe those measurements, as I mentioned. We'll talk about facts a little bit later, but those are things. And one of the things you're going to see in almost every star schema, every business intelligence data warehouse situation is a dimension of time or date. So everything that is something that's unique to almost every single one. In retail sales, you're also usually going to have a store. You're going to have the product. You're going to have a promotion. These are all type of dimensions you're going to look at or include in your star schema so that you can investigate. Here's an example of the star schema for retail sales. As you can see, in the middle here, you have the key items about the fact table, the retail fact table. And what you're going to see is the keys. So you have a date key that points to the date key and all the attributes about the date key in the date dimension table. Then you have a product key. That product key links to the product key dimension and the store key in the same way, and then ultimately the promotion key. And then in this case, we're going to talk about the point of sale transaction number. In this case, might be your receipt number that you would see on your receipt coming out. But this is a very simple star schema. We've included a date, what product it is, what store it's coming from, and if there's a promotion involved. Those are all things that you would put in this particular star schema. In step 4, identify what your facts are. And I will say that this is probably the most critical thing you need to do. A lot of times it's also the easiest in some case. So in our retail sales case, you're going to want to care about sales quantity. You're going to want about the per unit sales price. You want to know what the sales dollar amount is, and if it's available easily, the cost of that product. And then ultimately, the ability to capture the gross profit from that. Sometimes this can be a little tricky because the sales are not, or I'm sorry, the costs are not always easily attained. You may know the cost to purchase the process, but sometimes in your systems you don't carry things like the carrying costs and what it is for you to warehouse that and store it and ship it. Sometimes those things are not built in easily, so you'll have to go get that or grab those. But ultimately, that's what you're trying to get to in the step 4 of your process. Now we're going to talk about non-additive facts, and these are things that the percentages and ratios, like gross margin, the unit price, when you calculate of the sums and not the sum of the ratios. So you don't want to do averages of averages. It's a very poor practice to have, and you get information that is not very useful for you, and quite honestly. Date dimension, and this is one again that you care about what you want to see. And if you look at the book on page 39, you will see some of the different things about the dates and how you can do that in advance. You're going to want the date key, the date. You're going to want the full date, day of the week. And if you have some kind of specific way you target, for example, your products with a date key, that's also a very important part that you might also want to capture as part of this dimension. Now the product dimension, probably the easiest to understand of all. It's what describes that storage unit in the store, the SKU. It may have as many as 50 or more attributes. And this is something you're going to want to go drill up and drill down on to be able to get better information about your product dimension. Very key, but also probably the easiest of the dimensions to understand. And again, we'll talk about within there. You're going to have the key, as we talk about, which is always there. This will be the unique identifier to that particular product. You'll have its description, the SKU number, if it's something you have. If there's a brand associated with it, a brand, the category it belongs to, what department that's in, the type of package, the package size, and if it's food, the fat content, all those type of things would be things that you would keep as attributes in your product dimension. So now we take a look at that star schema now, and now we've added a few more things to our fact table. We haven't changed the date or the store. Product and promotion have all stayed the same. But now, in addition to the transaction number, we've added the sales quantity, the dollar amount, the cost, and the gross profit of that transaction. So these are now, as you see it, we've now expanded our fact table to include those key measures that are important. And again, now we're going to talk about the store and all the different key things that are in the store. And I won't go to all of them, but remember, one thing that's always key in every dimension table is you have to have that key that ties back to the fact table. You're going to have geographic dimension. That could be lat long that allows you to identify the location of the store. And you're going to see a lot of things here that would identify the address specifically. But you're also going to see things like store manager, the region, what's the floor type? Is it a small scale store? Is it a large scale? Is it a marketplace? Whatever your key elements of your store, is it, it could potentially also have things about how much parking, how much access is there. These are all things that you might care about the dimensions in your about your store. And then promotion, obviously, what your promotion is. Is it a price reduction type? Is it a % off? Is it a buy 3 get 1 free? Is it been in an ad? When was that ad produced? These are all the items on here, all items that are key in your dimension. And one of the things you mentioned here, this is, you don't always see this separately in here because remember, we're already going to have a time and date dimension. This is specific to the promotion. It's good from January 1st to January 11th. That's the beginning and end date of your promotion. Those are key things you would want to capture. And then you can answer more dimensions. You can add those as things happen. For example, the example we talked about is frequent flyer, frequent shopper information, or customer ID information. Those are all things that you can extend your model with in your dimension. And again, when we talk about star schema, the other option in dimensional modeling is snowflaking. And snowflaking is known as normalizing the attributes. So the redundant are removed from the table, they're denormalized in a dimension table. Snowflaking, sometimes it seems like an easy answer, but it's something you should very much think twice about before you do it, because it can cause you all kind of complications and potential performance problems. So while it's still a very popular thing to use, think twice of it before it becomes your mode of modeling. So here you have an example of the star schema with the retail sales, the product dimension, the brand dimension. So here you've seen a snowflake off of the sales or off the normal star factor by having the dimensions come off of other dimension tables. That's what we mean by the snowflake effect on there. That's why it looks like it. And again, one of the things that this is key for is market basket analysis. We will get into those a little bit later in the course. We'll talk about the different tools. That's why we'll be introduced to a tool that we'll look at called 9 that will help you understand how we can do some market basket analysis and other type of data mining. But again, the key to that is it helps you understand how to merchandise and how to sell your products. And that's why it'll be real key. And creating these models allow us to do that efficiently. Thank you.